Nigeria's opposition forces may be considering ex-Transport Minister Rotimi Amechi as a 2027 presidential candidate amid ongoing tension between Peter Obi and Atiku Abubakar. Obi insists on retaining his 2023 running mate, Dati Baba Ahmed, while Atiku resists stepping aside. Amechi's 60th birthday colloquium, themed Weaponizing Hunger, became a platform to gauge support for his candidacy. He reiterated his opposition to President Tinubu, citing national unity concerns, and sources say the Buhari camp backs him as a one-term consensus option. There are indications the coalition may form a new party, the All Democratic Alliance, to avoid legal complications tied to fusing into existing parties like SDP or ADC. Some insiders warn that ADA could split the opposition three ways: Obi, Atiku, and Amechi on separate platforms. Now, for a chat about the challenges of opposition in their quest to unseat an incumbent in Nigeria and why the coalition led by former Vice President Atiku Abubakar suddenly went quiet, Director of Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. Sam Amadi, joins us now. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Sam.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Now, it's looking like the coalition that seemed so energetic about unseating, after the 2023 election, about unseating the current president has lost momentum. What exactly would you attribute this loss of momentum to?
Well, thank you. Well, this is a long journey. The battle towards 2027 is going to have highs and ups. And again, in terms of media and in terms of maybe the usual newspaper and comments and so on, yes, that's kind of things have slowed down. But it doesn't really mean that they put their leg off the pedal. Now, some of this work will be done essentially discussions, meetings that may be low energy, low visibility, low publicity. But again, it could be said that the hard bones now need to be cracked. People want to create a replication of 2015, when APC created a coalition and merged to become APC today. But things are different. First, it was clearer what to do. What was to be done is to unseat Tinubu. There were favorable headwinds. One of them was the fact that unseat Jonathan. The fact was Jonathan had, it was somewhat a consensus that power should shift to the north, and Jonathan came from the south. There was also a sense in which people believed, especially from the north, that perhaps Jonathan break the faith in terms of not doing one term and stepping down for another. Again, it was clear who leads the opposition. Tinubu, Buhari had his 11 million or 9 million at least votes, and then Tinubu and others were clear in their mind that power needed to go to the north. That was a grievance that was clear, and Buhari had been the guy who had been strongly leading in terms of popularity. And so constructing a coalition was very clear. Now, it's less clear now. Tinubu is a certain president who has done one term, and removing him, that nobody can make the compelling argument that power ought to shift to the north now. It's not compelling. I mean, you could try to say, well, it doesn't matter, but it's not compelling. So you have a problem that what's more compelling is to keep power in the south for the next 4 years. Again, no clear leader here. Atiku has his claim to leadership. P2B has a claim with doing extremely very well, with a very big support base. And then, of course, people like Erufai, Amechi, and others. So the formula is difficult to put together now than it was in 2015. And that could explain why you're going to have some timeouts in terms of enthusiasm, some confusion here and there, and maybe a lot more will be done secretly to see if they can square the circle. Squaring the circle here is, what do you do with P2B, who has the real momentum, who kind of, the change in momentum is with him? What do you do with Atiku Abubakar, who has a significant claim that probably he is the guy who has the best, whether it's the best name recognition or best network. What do you do with El-Rufai, who has the intensity to fight on? So, and then Amechi now, who's coming from seeming nowhere in terms of political base, to use some kind of rhetoric to insert himself in. So it's quite a difficult proposition here that it was in 2015. And so that can explain that many people have retreated back to some, to going back to meetings, to going back to trying to strategy and so on. And so we might not see, a push just to wake up and then bam, 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 the coalition is working. You're going to see sometimes they could be silent, they could be struggling to dot the T's and cross the I's.
Well said, Dr. Amadi.
Or dot the I's and cross the T's, as the case might be.
Of course. Very well said. What you mentioned about the lack of clarity is quite apparent, and no clear leader as well. But I'm just wondering, at this point, with all that we're seeing, are opposition leaders seemingly more focused on 2027 positioning as opposed to building a genuine alternative movement?
Absolutely. That's a problem. Again, when 2015, we saw two major events. First was the mass protest against President Jonathan over the fuel prices increase, which was somewhat engineered by Tinubu in the APC and of course, El-Rufai and others. So, but again, that setting was there, and they were successful to push what looked like a national protest. And then the Chibok happened, and it was weaponized and politicized expectedly. Then there was somewhat, framing that Jonathan needed to step out to get Nigeria working. Now, this new opposition has not created a national narrative. I think that's the next stage where they should work on. There are too many things, and essentially, the Tinubu administration is fighting back well, communicating very well to nullify the expected political impact of the economic crisis we are going through. I mean, they are talking of their policies. They are saying, look, hard policies will take time to mature into benefit for the people. So in a way, they are trying to communicate away an apparent economic deficit. The people are suffering, inflation is high, poverty everywhere. But the opposition is not building, first, a national democratic movement, a movement like we saw in 2014, that with civil society playing a key role. In 2014, civil society, for whatever reason, got married to the opposition, fully in bed with them and driving this anti-Jonathan rhetoric. We've not yet seen that large-scale, civic political movement before the political alliance. So the political politicians seem to be convinced that once they are able to strike a deal among themselves, they're going to have the momentum naturally. No, which is wrong. They needed to create that momentum. And the only people who are doing that in some measure are the Obidient, but essentially limited. They are still not able to expand that narrative, that movement, so that we need to see first a movement to transcend APC and Tinubu. And that movement is all you create. If you create that movement, then the question of who among all the gladiators is better positioned to inherit this movement. So I think that the common thing they should work together first is that movement. And then, but first they are working on who should inherit a non-existing movement so far. And that's the problem they have. So yes, there's a natural coalition that needs to happen, which is a coalition of all the people who are angry that the country is going the wrong direction. And this is evident. But what they're struggling is a coalition on who should be the president of a post-Tinubu and post-APC era. I think Nigeria is ready for a post-APC era, and that's expected. 8 years or 10 years, if Tinubu finishes tenure, that means they've got up to the same, close to PDP, 16 years. And things are not better in any way at all. So Nigerians will be ready to get to a post-APC era in 2037. But
Indeed.
The problem is that those who want to inherit that have not put together that coalition and built a narrative, a national democratic movement that should precede who should rule. And that happened in 2014. It preceded the APC merger, even though the APC chieftains created it. But here, the PDP and the Labour Party leaders and the other coalition members are not working hard to create a national moment, a moment of transcending the APC, misgovernance, as the case might be right now.
And Dr. Amadi, we know that it's largely seen as a near impossible task to unseat an incumbent president. Even when it comes to governors, we've seen only a few, several governors being impeached in office, and we know that it took a lot to take them out of office. What do you think is the major challenge when it comes to unseating presidents who a large number of the populace do not agree with his policies?
I think there are two. One is institutional, one is political. The first institutional is going beyond the pessimism around electoral system and the court. I mean, everybody, those who think it's difficult to unseat the incumbent today are not thinking about what the incumbent has done in terms of policy. They're not thinking about how favorability rating of the incumbent. They're just saying, look, the system is stuck. INEC can't really, can't give you, a clean election, and the courts themselves have been, kind of captured in this sterile status quo jurisprudence. So essentially, institutionally, the problem is how do you recreate confidence and reality that the INEC can run a clean election and the courts will be ready to uphold, or upturn, maybe rigged elections. That's the first institutional problem. The political problem is how do you create a need for change that transcends the ethnic and religious divides that we have now. In 2014, opposition was capable or largely able to do that, but now we are struggling to see, can you sell a candidate, a candidate that will embody this coalition and not get that candidate trapped in either zoning, is from the north, is the turn of the south to complete their 4 years, or their 8 years. If it's from the south, how do you say that person to the Muslim northern electorates? Would the northern leaders come around that candidate and present that candidate as a moment to transcend this ethnic divide? So that's a political problem, to create this leadership and the leadership of the coalition in a way that it transcends the ethnic religious divide. And the institutional problem is to recreate hope and optimism that we can get past INEC's history of failure, INEC's history of complicity, and the court's history of endorsing rigged elections. So this is the institutional crisis, and that's why electoral reform, re-electoral reform, and reform of judicial electoral jurisprudence at the level of court has to happen. If we don't get past that, we probably will have a national movement that's real, but aborted at the polls and at the courts. That's really the two challenges, analytically, I see. One is institutional, the court and INEC are the major problem. Second is political. How do we create this momentum to transcend ethnic religious divide? Assuming the guy who could drive this is southerner, how do you get him past the north? If it's a northerner, how do you get him past the idea that the south must complete their 8 years? So this is the political and cultural constraints you have to overcome in 2027.
Absolutely, and I look forward to the day when we will go past these institutional and political challenges that you beautifully outlined. But when it comes to structural challenges that make it difficult to sustain opposition momentum, well, why do you think that's the case in Nigeria?
Well, because we've not yet got a social movement, a political ideology that kind of defines public leadership. So it's too transactional, and it's gotten worse. I mean, from 1999, part of the problem was that the military complex was still there. We didn't get to see politics that's ideologically rooted and contested. And now it's worse that we've seen the clash of ego, power, interest. So people are basically swapping, moving and swimming across the board, looking for their own interest. So it's worse now. I don't know what happened, but since 2023, we've seen a kind of politics that's monetized, that's ideologically empty. And so that's a problem with opposition. We need to have an opposition that stays in the game for some time. Give credit to Buhari. He stayed in the game for a long time. Even Tinubu, give credit to him. He stayed in the game for a significant period of time, until his moment came. Now, we don't have opposition leader. I mean, look at the opposition now. You see Rufai, who left office a few years ago. Look at Amadi, who has been like for 24 years or 40 years in governance. So the opposition basically is defined by the person who lost power the last election. They become opposition. That's not the way opposition should be. Opposition should be defined by people who have a coherent, idea of statecraft. And whether they're in power, and when they leave power, they become opposition in a structured way, and they're not going to flip again until they win back power. So if you can create a real opposition, and I honestly, like it or leave it, the Obidient movement could, if they deepen themselves and broaden their commitment, they could become that opposition in and out of power in a consistent way. And Nigerian politics and governance needs opposition, not defined by proposing the guy who is in power, but defined by proposing a concept of politics and governance, that if they win in power and get into power, they stay there. If they lose power, they stay together to continue to push for that perspective of governance.
All right, Dr. Sam Amadi, before we let you go, because we're really pressed for time. We're really pressed for time, but I just need to get your take on this. Do you see any meaningful challenge to the current administration before 2027? I
think so. I think there should be, and there ought to be. That's the only way we can improve the quality of governance of the ruling party. There should be, and there will be. I think there will be, but we need to raise both the intensity of opposition politics and ruling party politics, because that's all the only way you can get the best out of the ruling party and the best out of the people waiting to take over for the ruling party. I expect strong opposition going to 2027, but I want it to be orderly, coherent, and focused on the welfare of the people, not clash of big egos, and not violent people who want to get to power just because they need to get that power. And that's not be good for our country.
Well, I hope your expectations become a reality, because it will indeed be good for the nation. Thank you so much for your insightful analysis, as always, Dr. Sam Amadi. We appreciate you here on News Day.